Um, Man, I think there's also this crypto conference at the Fed is, it's just getting started too. There is so much bullishness happening all across the board. Uh, Ultimately, bringing these stablecoin issuers, bringing stablecoin companies, I think this is going to pave the way for crypto companies in general to become more entrenched in Wall Street, in the Fed. All of these things are happening right before our eyes, and it's happening at a grand scale when it comes to the finance element of things. But then it's also happening at a micro scale when it comes to the technology of things. We're iterating and innovating one piece of the stack at a time, and it's incredible to see. Our next guest, co-founder of Daylight, Jason, is coming on now. We're gonna bring him up, um, and here he is. Jason, what's going on, brother? How you
How you
doing?
doing, man?
Good, man. Good. Just we were live streaming this Fed crypto conference, which was pretty incredible to see. I think Kathy Wood is going to be up in just a few, um, and they're just talking about how we're bringing these two worlds together. Where I mean, just a year ago, they were tackling our industry. They were bringing it down with every shred of their being, and things are just very, very different now. Have you guys seen this in practice? Like, were you building in the Gensler era? Did you kind of have to adapt your go-to-market strategy for one way or the other to kind of circumvent things or avoid getting in trouble? And now it's kind of blue skies, free and clear.
Absolutely. Did we? We actually founded Daylight and raised our initial kind of pre-seed round all the way back in 2022, in the middle of 2022. So we went straight through the Gensler era. And as a result, kind of in the middle of 2023, right, we actually left crypto behind as a go-to-market wedge and as a capital markets wedge, not permanently, but it was clearly not, it was a non-starter for a US-based company to be really experimenting with DeFi and with tokens as kind of a core part of the product. And so we actually built just a very traditional electrification marketplace for the residential market for a while. And as the election started to shape up and we started to see pro crypto policies on the kind of agenda for the election, it really gave us the comfort to go back and build what our initial vision was. So we've been through it, and I mean it's wonderful to be in the position we're in today.
Absolutely. Um, that I mean, it's well said, and this is just the general sentiment that we're hearing, from builders. Sometimes they were pushed offshores; they went to other countries. Sometimes they abandoned crypto altogether, and now we're seeing this resurgence. Um, but Jason, man, it's your first time on the show. It's a pleasure to have you. I'd love to get a little bit of an intro on yourself, and also you mentioned what the overall vision for Daylight is. Please, introduce Daylight to our audience and give us a sense of what that overall vision is.
Absolutely. Well, it's really great to be here to introduce Daylight. Daylight at its core is really a new kind of energy network that connects people, capital markets, and power companies in the grid into one unified network. What that means in practice is Daylight really offers energy that's cheaper and more affordable and more reliable than what their utility offers to homeowners through an energy as a service product. Homeowners can subscribe to Daylight and at no cost get solar and storage installed on their roof and pay Daylight rather than pay their traditional utility bill. Capital markets get access to electricity as a brand new asset class for the first time through our on-chain pools, where we're offering the ability to participate directly in this new kind of unique infrastructure revenue stream. And power companies can tap into this network as an aggregated new flexible resource to support energy grids as energy grids are increasingly strained from new demands. And all of that is kind of bundled together into one core product that reduces costs for participants and increases the opportunity of the kind of global network. So really our North Star and our mission is to scale energy capacity for power grids to meet all the coming demand from AI, from robotics, from reshoring of industrial capacity, while also ensuring that homeowners and business owners can get access to more affordable and reliable power than they traditionally can.
The headline that we have on here is Jason on energy capital markets, which if internet capital markets took the world by storm, just a few months ago when Solana was pioneering that, I think energy capital markets are another meta here that is just getting tapped. Um, I was just listening to All In today. I'm on my way to the studio. These guys were talking about how Wisconsin, Indiana, these guys have data centers that are coming to their states, and they're actually getting shut down at like the city level because people don't want a few things. They don't want a rise in their electricity. They don't want the rise in their water, and they don't want the noise pollution. And they sort of started talking about how these issues can be circumvented. Um, I'm just curious when it comes to these energy capital markets. We're seeing data centers, we're seeing all of these things, we're seeing AI just starve our power grid, right? Did you also kind of before you started building daylight, did you see this trend how energy was becoming just this really, really scarce commodity? And you saw energy capital markets as a way of kind of transitioning to more of an abundant era of energy? And what,
Absolutely.
yeah, maybe you could just expand upon that. Like, what were some of the early signals that you saw that kind of lit that light bulb in your head and said, "Oh, we've got to go build this."
Absolutely. I mean, that was very clearly one of like the big North Stars for kind of the genesis of Daylight. My background is in energy finance. So started my career in energy and power investment banking, moved into private equity, investing in energy infrastructure. And what was very apparent all the way back in even 2022 for us is that for the last 2 decades, most people don't know this, but electricity demand growth in the US has been totally flat. Any growth in electricity demand has been offset by efficiency gains for the most part. And so what we have is an entire generation of grid operators, utility executives that have never in their career experienced demand for power rising. And all of a sudden, we're moving to a world with the rise of AI, with the rise of compute, with the rise of robotics, reshoring of industrial capacity and kind of deglobalization, electric vehicles and autonomous vehicle fleets. All these things significantly, number one, change the profile of energy consumption, and number two, increase it significantly, right? We're expecting peak demand of electricity to more than double over the next 10 years now.
Mhm.
And so we need to find new solutions in order to meet all this coming energy demand. The fact is, these AI data centers just won't come if the power isn't available for them. And we will lose out in this next version, in this next super cycle of the internet, of capital markets, of capitalism, if we can't provide the most basic commodity in order to build it, which is power. And
Mhm.
so what Daylight is here to do is be a new kind of generative resource for the grid to scale distributed energy to number one, meet that energy demand, because the more energy capacity, generation, storage we put on grids, the more it frees up energy capacity to go to new sources like
Mhm.
AI data centers. But what uniquely Daylight does compared to a centralized energy developer is it does that while also lowering the cost for homeowners, for business owners, and gives them something that's more affordable and frankly a better product because it's more reliable and inherently protected from any kind of blackouts or storms. And so that's kind of the unique position that Daylight finds itself in.
Awesome. And I think you're hitting on what the capacity for this is, what the possibilities of this coming to market is, and what it does for electricity, what it can do for homeowners, what it can do for data centers, anyone, any consumer of electricity, which is effectively everyone. But how does it actually work? Maybe you could describe the mechanics, right? You're kind of you're consuming electricity, but you're also getting rewarded for it. There's obviously a crypto tokenized element to it. Can you just kind of walk us through the game theory and the mechanism design?
Absolutely. At the high level for the homeowner, right? Really, Daylight's product is more reliable and affordable power. So the homeowner subscribes to Daylight, and when they subscribe to Daylight, solar gets installed on their roof, an oversized battery gets installed on the outside of the home, and they start consuming electricity from the system that's sited on their local home. So instead of having to pay cash, $25,000, $30,000 for the system, or take out a loan, they simply outsource it to Daylight, and they just get the benefit of the hardware, which is the power itself and the cheaper, more affordable, and reliable power. At the same time, as we scale
So
this
it's
amount of nodes,
no cost to the homeowner,
no upfront cost,
no
right?
upfront
You're
cost.
buying the power from the system rather than buying the hardware,
So
and that's
you guys are innovating and replacing whoever their current power provider is.
exactly the
Okay,
Daylight becomes the main supplier of electricity through the hardware that's installed on the home.
got it.
From there, as you expand the amount of these little nodes in a network through software, you can actually aggregate the solar and batteries together and allow power traders, utility companies, other grid operators to tap directly into this aggregated power when demand on the grid is super strained. The grid itself is not strained very often, but when it
Mhm,
is, it needs power and it needs it now. And we
mhm,
have a resource that can supply it in a large quantity across this entire network of homes and generate additional revenues from doing so. So
mhm,
instead of purely just generating all your revenues from selling a product to the off taker, the network can generate something that's even more meaningful by taking its aggregated capacity and selling it to power grids.
mhm.
And the last component, right, is how do you finance all this? And that's what we plan to do with DeFi and stablecoin markets, where we want to launch on-chain yield products that make electricity investable globally for the first time. Today, if you want exposure to electricity and you're not Blackstone or BlackRock and you're buying power plants at large scale, you can buy utility wrappers, right? You can buy utility stocks, you can buy independent power producer stocks, You can't really get exposure to the underlying asset class itself. And
Mhm.
what Daylight is starting to offer is a tokenized version of electricity to allow investors to participate in its financing, and Daylight to scale the physical infrastructure on its network. So that's kind of the core three-sided marketplace of Daylight between capital markets, homeowners, and the grid itself, and really how it all works.
Yeah.
We plan to, additionally, if you look at the kind of history of deep in
Mhm.
crypto, there's been a lot of interesting uh, use cases in like scaling supply. Maybe less so on generating a ton of demand up to this point, but we've seen incredibly exciting proof points from Helium, HiveMapper,
Mhm.
Filecoin, Bitcoin, Ethereum. When you launch a token, you decentralize a network, and you give ownership to a community. You get these really interesting outcomes on the supply side. And so Daylight plans to do the same thing with actually decentralizing our network, turning it into what is almost a form of a electricity cooperative, and
Mhm.
distributing ownership to participants who are going and scaling that network. And we think that is the way that we could achieve significant scale kind of beyond the traditional sales model that's been in the solar space for a long time.
It's just fascinating because it's not just another financial engineering that, Ponzi meme coin. Like there's actual real productivity that is being done at the electricity and the bare power level to help people, like improve people's lives. I remember hearing about in Texas, there was a power outage, it was due to the grid.
Yep.
The grid was significantly strained. You probably know a lot more about this than I do. Could you just explain why the grid was so strained in Texas and how daylight could potentially solve an issue like that?
Yeah, if you think, and this isn't specific to Texas, this is California, this is the Northeast, this
Mhm.
is really everywhere. We've seen these massive grid events that either almost lead to blackouts or do lead to blackouts. Really, the nature of it is power grids have to be sized to peak demand, not to average demand. The reason for that is supply and demand of electricity always have to be in balance. And if they become imbalanced, the grid itself starts to fail. It'll destroy equipment, it becomes dangerous. And so grid operators actually shut the grid off whenever supply and demand become extremely imbalanced. So when you think about the rise from demand to demands, that impacts what average demand is. That happen in a matter of hours. When corporations see peak demand rise above what the forecast is, they find new ways to supply in the system or to reduce demand in the system in order to ensure the grid balanced. And so, just like Daylight offers basically a real-time resource to power grids, an emergency reserve resource to power grids, increase supply or decrease demand to ensure that they keep the system balanced in these periods of really, really peak strain and maybe above what their forecast was. Nuclear plants can't ramp up quickly. That's a big downside of nuclear. Coal plants, natural gas plants can ramp up a bit faster, but batteries and demand response are really this resource. And Daylight's entire network of batteries and demand response can provide that support to power grids, help balance the system before it gets to a place of crisis.
Dude, I love it. I'm curious, like, where are you guys at in your stage of development now? How can people get involved? Like, it is the only way to get involved just from buying a solar panel and installing this hardware and becoming a part of the network that way? Can people buy the token without having hardware? And kind of grab the three-sided marketplace here, but can you just expand on who some of the network
The
participants are?
most fundamental right is the host of the equipment. So the subscriber who subscribes like hosts the infrastructure and becomes a new node in the that's available right now in 2 states, Illinois, Massachusetts, but we're expanding that across the US pretty rapidly. And so that's like the basic participate is host infrastructure, more power, reliable power, and get for helping scale like network participate yet, but and we in DeFi markets participating in financing of distributed equipment across the network. This looks to what the AI is doing on the GPU side. Your team, an excellent, excellent work in kind of designing mechanisms on stable coins to find some GPUs collab. Product will look very similar to that for electricity. And then the third way is really to be kind of a community supporter and it's deep in style, if you will, a fan operator on Daylight. So going around educating on Daylight, people into the system, referring people into the system, explore how it can make their house more resilient, they can make power bill cheaper, and how they can become in the network. So we'll actually be putting out a lot of tools, education material, and resources for people who don't their own and can't start daylight, but want to get involved in the network, get rewarded for starting the network, to go to their local community and provide like their families, their scale the network from bottoms up,
Mhm.
very traditional deep in way.
Man. And can you help me understand how energy transfer works? Like when you have a battery attached to a house and so say I'm getting this wrong. Technically, you're you panels, you're capturing energy from the sun, you're turning that into solar and electricity, and you're storing that in the battery. That's attached to the home. When it comes to transferring the energy from one battery attached to one home to another home with another battery somewhere in a different county, because over there the drain. How does energy make that transfer? Like how does Hmm, man, okay. Um, oh, this is fascinating. And like these are conversations that we don't have very often. A lot of times it's, financialized kind of tokenomics here. You guys are building hardware, and I think there's only a select few projects that are building these deep in infrastructure projects that ultimately I'm curious actually how the network effects could expand as you guys grow. Um, like you said you're starting in Massachusetts, maybe one other state. Why did you choose to start there? And then as you start to expand regionally in the US, maybe globally, what are
Yeah,
some of the
so
network
where
effects
we
that
kind
take
of
hold?
prioritize markets is
Like
based on where the
how do
market
you
is telling
expect
us
this
to
network
prioritize
to
those
grow and
markets. So
expand?
think very high power prices compared to a national average, and where the market itself is deregulated enough for us to participate. So traditional power markets, like back in the day, were served by a vertically integrated monopoly utility. In kind of the early 2000s, the majority of power markets were deregulated, where the generation of electricity is competitive. Anyone can really participate in this market to generate electricity. And that's an attractive marketplace for us to monetize on the grid services side. So we look for the intersection of high power prices where we can provide a real benefit to consumers and markets that have very easy access for us to participate in and generate additional revenues. That's why we picked the Northeast. We think there's a ton of strain, both from data centers and other reasons why there's kind of very high power prices in that market. They have attractive deregulated markets for us to participate in. And then we'll be expanding outward from there to other markets as they come online. But the unique thing I think about decentralized networks is that they will at some point begin to just scale on their own. And as they scale on their own, that aggregated asset base allows us to do other interesting things that you wouldn't be able to do if that like upfront before that asset base existed. For example, there's an interesting thought experiment of what if data centers developers themselves could contract with a
Mhm.
decentralized network to basically have a bilateral virtual power plant where they say, "Hey, I need an additional 10 megawatts of capacity. Can I pay this network directly to dispatch when I need it to dispatch when the peak demand on the grid is highest, in order to ensure that I can be interconnected in and the utility will accept my interconnection process." So there's interesting things like that emerge as your asset base starts to scale and you have a physical resource that you can build markets around.
And and you just reiterate what the token design is? You're using the token to facilitate transactions of energy in
No,
the
so you'll
network,
pay
right? So
with
you're
dollars that actually
paying
become stable coins on chain,
for
but no, there's
energy
no
with
kind of
tokens.
user needing
That's
to
the idea?
price their services in some crazy volatile token.
Okay.
It really is very much a economic alignment, deep in style incentive tool for scaling the network and rewarding people for joining the network and
Okay.
reducing origination costs and customer acquisition costs. It's used for, of course, governance and shepherding the network, and we'll have like some interesting announcements on how the network design is actually structured legally to make that pretty enforceable. And then the last is economic rights on the protocol and protocol fees from financing these assets for delivering them into the ground and then claiming fees on top of the assets themselves. So this is very much a kind of deep inner DeFi style network token distributed to its participants to decentralize ownership and decentralize incentives and decentralized capital formation.
Got it. So it's
Contribution and
more of a
stake, exactly.
means
Yeah.
of measuring stake in the network. The stakeholder and um, a utility token. Okay. Okay. Um, cool. And what is how does the cost stack up to current energy providers? Like you said, no upfront cost. The equipment, the installation, all that is taken care of. But in Florida, I have FP&L,
Yeah,
right?
so it certainly
Um,
ranges, but our ideal
how
target that
does
we think is a
how
sweet
would
spot is 20 to
the
30%
cost
savings
on like a
immediately
monthly
on the
basis
utility
compare?
bill with backup power built in. So there's immediate savings to the customer. They get access to an oversized battery to protect them from any kind of power outage, and they get what is really a better service for a better price. So 20 to 30% is kind of our ideal target, but it can fluctuate from there.
Mhm. Awesome. What were some of the learnings that you took from the other deep projects like Helium and these guys that have set up this infra? You even mentioned Bitcoin and ETH as ETH obviously started proof of work and Bitcoin still is. What were some of the learnings? Do you think these guys did it the right way, and it's just a matter of these are some guys that have stuck around. They survived
I
for
think this is like it's
they
also kind
obviously
of
seen some
back to like
success. When it
the
comes to the network
Chris
design driving the
Dixon read write
network,
own
what
like
were
your
some tools
margin
that
is
you
my
built out that you guys are going to
opportunity.
employ?
Decentralizing a network, especially in a regulatory regime like we have today, as crypto is becoming really professionalized and institutionalized in the U.S., it is like taking the Bezosian "your margin is my opportunity" and applying it even further, which is saying I'm taking all of my economic value and distributing it to my users, and if you aren't doing the same thing, you won't be able to compete against me. And that's something that I think Helium did in a really interesting way, which is build this huge groundswell, this huge community, 200,000 people in Discord nerding out on radios and wireless signals. That's something no other company that has attempted to build a new wireless infrastructure network that's not AT&T, that's not Verizon, has ever accomplished or even come close to. And so what we see is the opportunity to use tokens, to your point, to reward contribution, to reward ownership, to build a cult brand around energy, around the super cycle that we're attempting to build and scale, and then to outcompete other networks that are attempting to capture all of those economics back to themselves and extract all those economics back to themselves. We don't think anyone would be able to compete with us when rewards are actually rewarding those that are building the network rather than the company that might be trying to string it all together.
Mm. This is fascinating. I mean, do you anticipate that more of the companies that are currently providing power are any of them thinking like this? I have a feeling, some of these guys are launching solar panels, they're doing installations, and more of them, and then there's a subset of those guys are installing these batteries as a means of capturing, storing energy. Maybe even a subset of them are thinking about the transferability. But do you anticipate more companies going this
I think
direction?
there will be, and there
Uh,
are quite a few
Kind of
startups that
layering
are
on this stack
interesting
and
and,
then
and and
building a more
and are chasing this
decentralized network of
opportunity. I
energy?
think we all have our different styles. Daylight is certainly the only one that's attempting to build this in a community first way, and is also attempting to tap into internet capital markets for what is basically infinite scale to actually develop the infrastructure required. But there are quite a few different companies who are starting to think about this today. What we've seen is kind of the legacy solar industry has really started to collapse on itself because it was propped up on really predatory and inefficient sales mechanics, really inefficient predatory financing mechanics, and over reliance on
Mhm.
tax credits that are now phasing out. And so what we're seeing is really the old guard is kind of collapsing. What that opens up is kind of a early 2010s fintech style opportunity in a totally different market where all these fintechs emerged after the 2008 financial crisis to provide a better product at a better price to people. That's the similar opportunity here in energy and distributed energy today, as the kind of old guard starts to falter, and these new companies are doing things in a network first way, developing batteries, deploying them on the grid, and using this kind of total network to support the grid rather than just purely being a high ticket sales business.
Got it. Jason, it's been a pleasure talking to you, man. Love just to get some closing thoughts. Like, where this what experience been like, where you guys
Job's
are at
certainly not
now, because
finished,
obviously the
and
job's
our total focus is
not finished.
on
You guys are just
scaling
getting started. So,
megawatts under management.
what's coming
Eventually,
next?
our goal, we like to say terawatts in all of our posts, because our goal is to build terawatts of new energy capacity and do it in a way that is community first and rewards people for doing so. So what you'll see from us is deployment of energy subscriptions at scale in our initial markets, expansion outward into new markets, and then opening up participation in the financing stack for these types of infrastructure assets coming in the next quarter, which we think will be incredibly exciting for DeFi, opening up a new uncorrelated yield class, getting exposure to the energy super cycle led by AI and robotics, and really providing globally like the first access to that opportunity for the first time. So anybody listening should follow us on Twitter at
Sweet.
daylight energy underscore. We're working on a better handle, but for now there is an underscore at the end. Make sure you don't miss it, and follow along on all the opportunities to get involved and participate across all components of the stack.
Yeah. Well, you got a customer in me whenever you guys do launch in Florida. We got plenty of sun. So I can be a contributor to the network, and yeah, I mean it's been great to watch your rise up until now. Just getting started.
Amazing. Thanks so
Thanks for
much for having me.
joining. We'd
This is
love to
great.
host you again soon, man. And best of luck on
See ya.
continuing the build. Yeah, same here. Cheers, man. See you next time. Very, very cool. Awesome. We're gonna keep things moving. I love these kind of alternate conversations where we have so many conversations about DATs, real world assets, stablecoins, all these things. Yeah, it is a stablecoin super cycle, but it's also an energy super cycle, as you guys heard from the last guest. So appreciate Jason for coming out.